Thanks for joining. My name is Oluchi Gloria Obu, and I'm the Public Engagement Specialist at the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation, MCIC. Welcome to today's special edition of Local Brews and Global Views. This edition is in celebration of the International Day of Peace and Winnipeg's Peace Days. As we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're hosting this event from Winnipeg, which is on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of many Indigenous communities, including the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We're grateful for the opportunity to host this event. For those new to our event, MCIC is a coalition of about 44 organizations working in international cooperation worldwide. We support, connect, and amplify the work of our members and partners and educate Manitobans about global issues, empowering them to take action toward the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These 17 goals aim to create a better world by 2030 by tackling global issues, including Goal 5, gender equality, Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, which you'll hear about this evening. Our funded projects, including Mennonite Central Committee's projects that we're discussing today, work toward achieving these SDGs. In addition, our SDG resources and funded projects highlight the interconnected nature of the SDGs because none of these goals can be achieved on their own. As research has shown, that globally, many groups are disadvantaged, particularly women, who encounter multiple intersecting forms of discrimination based on race or ethnicity, poverty, disability, gender, and other factors. This means achieving Goal 1, no poverty, for instance, relies on the accomplishment of Goals 5, gender equality, Goal 10, reduced inequalities, Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. This edition of Local Brews and Global Views is in celebration of the International Day of Peace and Winnipeg's Peace Days. Each year, the International Day of Peace is observed globally on September 21st. The United Nations General Assembly declares this day as a day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace within and among all nations and peoples. The Winnipeg Peace Days grew out of a desire to celebrate the International Day of Peace. Winnipeg Peace Days promote and inspire understanding, goodwill, and compassion, locally, nationally, and internationally, encouraging conversation and relationships that will inspire action. It is my pleasure to introduce Annie Loewen, our special guest this evening. Annie is a Humanitarian Assistance Coordinator with Mennonite Central Committee, Canada. Annie assists MCC country programs and local partners in responding to humanitarian crises and natural disasters in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Ukraine, and Haiti. Annie holds an MSc in Public Administration with a focus on gender and disaster response from the University of Birmingham. She lives in Winnipeg. Annie will share MCC's work in the DRC tonight, where chronic violence and conflict impact many communities and put women and girls at risk of sexual and gender-based violence. MCC works with local partners to raise awareness of the violence women and girls experience and to engage communities and local leaders in addressing this violence. Thank you for joining us tonight. Over to you, Annie.
Really great to be part of this international celebration of the International Day of Peace and the coincidental Gender Equality Week as well, which is great. So thank you very much for having me. So first of all, maybe I'll just do a little bit of an introduction here. Mennonite Central Committee is a global nonprofit organization that began over 100 years ago in responding to the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine in the 1920s. As an Anabaptist organization, peace building is at the center of what MCC does around the world, and we try to integrate our peace work into both our relief and development programming as well. MCC primarily works through local community-based organizations as well as churches and other faith-based organizations. Our work includes humanitarian assistance work, food security and livelihoods programming, water, health and sanitation programming, education, and of course, peace programming. You may also, here in MCC, be familiar with some of our Mennonite Central Committee thrift stores, which help to raise funds and to support our programming, both locally and internationally. Around the world, MCC works in 47 different countries. Last year, we partnered with 385 local organizations to carry out 508 different projects. Currently, we have just under 1,000 MCC staff working around the world, which I didn't even know until a couple of days ago, so as I was preparing for this. MCC's peace work centers around training on peace building and conflict resolution through country-specific and regional training institutes, as well as peace clubs, which provide peace and conflict training to students in schools. Trauma healing is also something that's integrated into a lot of the work that we do, particularly in humanitarian settings and in countries where they're experiencing violent conflict, such as Ukraine and Ethiopia. We also work with partners who implement programming designed to engage people of different backgrounds and cultures to build relationships and trust and promote recovery from conflict for peaceful coexistence. MCC also works with communities on addressing root causes of gender-based violence, which I'll talk more in depth with in a few minutes. Particularly during the pandemic, we've seen that gender-based violence and domestic violence exists in communities all around the world, not just in communities that are conflict affected. So today I'm specifically here to talk with you about a program that Mennonite Central Committee and MCIC are partnering on in Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. A bit about the context in Congo is you'll see on the map that Congo is located right in the middle of the African continent, taking up a pretty significant area on the map. In fact, Congo is the 11th largest country in the world and covers more area than most of Western Europe. The population of Congo is nearly 100 million people, and while the official language is French, there are also over 300 different ethnic groups speaking over 215 different languages throughout the country. So Congo is incredibly diverse. Here is a closer map, and I'll kind of outline that Mennonite Central Committee works here around Lake Kivu in North Kivu and South Kivu, and also in the Kasai region and here around Kikwit. These are the locations where the projects that I'll be talking about are located. Particularly, I think of interest is that in the Kasai region in central Congo, there's actually more Mennonites located in central Congo than there are even in southern Manitoba, which is a nice little fun fact. The overall picture of DRC is that it's an incredibly rich, resource-rich country, producing large amounts of petroleum, copper, and other mineral resources. Critically, it's estimated that DRC produces around 70% of the world's supply of cobalt, which is a key mineral used to make lithium-ion batteries. So if you're currently watching this presentation from a laptop or a phone or a tablet, or you own a smartwatch or an e-reader or an electric car, anything with a rechargeable battery, really, chances are that some part of that device was actually sourced in DRC. So while DRC does not make the news every day, each one of us is connected to what's happening there based on, the technology that we use every single day. While DRC is incredibly resource rich, the wealth is not reflected in the population, where DRC is ranked 175th out of 189 countries on the UN development rankings. Currently, there are significant needs across the country, with over 227 million people in need of food assistance and 5.5 million people internally displaced by conflict, of which 3.3 million of those are children. MCC specifically does work with displaced communities and conflict-affected communities in DRC. With regular flare-ups of conflict between militia groups and national defense forces, conflict is an ongoing factor for millions of people, particularly for women and girls who have been targeted by these groups and experience high rates of sexual violence, particularly in insecure areas of the country. Despite all of that, and those overwhelming statistics, DRC is a really beautiful country. And our programming supporting local organizations working for peace is a place to start seeing hope in such a complicated context. The specific project that I'm here to talk about is called the Women's Situation Rooms. It's a project that is engaging 5 local community-based organizations in conflict-affected communities in DRC. The project engages female leaders and women in each community and creates a space for women to come together to discuss key issues impacting their communities, such as gender-based violence. Women's Situation Room members bring their own skills and knowledge to be able to promote peace and improved health within their communities. This is done through a combination of workshops and community outreach efforts led by the women themselves. These outreach efforts represent a critical aspect of the project's approach, engaging local leaders in conversations about peace and engaging men and boys in discussion on preventing domestic violence and reducing incidents of gender-based violence, including early marriage and stigma around survivors of rape. In sharp contrast to the way that the international media often portrays women as helpless victims of violence, the Women's Situation Room members play an important role in the community as leaders who share with their local community about the peace-building tools and the health awareness knowledge that they have, and particularly in addressing the grassroots level of conflict within such a complex context. So far, we've just passed the 6-month mark of programming, and we have over 2,000 women who have been engaging in this programming, participating in weekly or monthly meetings with the Women's Situation Room groups in their areas. The project is set to run for a total of 3 years, and the hope is that eventually we will engage over 13,000 women and then also their communities, hopefully creating a grassroots movement for peace in DRC. Beyond the peace training and the trauma skills that women learn through participating in these groups, there's also training on nutrition and malnutrition, which is particularly important in conflict-impacted areas like Kasai in central Congo, where UNICEF estimates that 28% of childhood deaths are actually caused by malnutrition. Women also engage in village savings and loan activities through these same Women's Situation Rooms, where members are able to bring in a small amount of money each month to pool together in order for each member to take out a small loan at some point and expand their opportunities for small business and even covering emergency costs as they come up that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford on their own. These funds are borrowed out and then paid back with a little bit of interest every couple of months. And then at the end of the year, each member is paid out their portion of the savings pot, and they can use those funds for critical needs like school uniforms and medical expenses. We often see peace talks organized globally that work around the complex issues that are unfolding across the world, but we rarely see women seated at those same discussion tables. Even though women represent over half of the world's population, we're often excluded from participating when it comes to decisions around the impacts that are most critical to their lives and to their communities. The Women's Situation Room project is bringing together women who have traditionally been marginalized because they are displaced, because they are poor, and they are survivors of gender-based violence. Bringing these women together and giving them a space to share their collective knowledge and experience creates a significant impact in amplifying women's voices in local decision-making and puts pressure on local leaders to consider the collective voice of women in their communities. I'll share with you 2 stories that I was recently told from our staff working in DRC. The first one is a story of forgiveness and peace. Mrs. Majuma is a member of the local Women's Situation Room located on the shores of Lake Kivu in eastern DRC. Mrs. Majuma is a small-scale farmer who depends on her crops to feed her family and herself. And one night, 2 teenage boys were caught stealing from her fields. They were taken to the local village chief, who recommended that they be brought to the police station to be charged with stealing. When Mrs. Majuma heard about this, she proposed that to the village chief that he bring together the parents of the 2 boys and herself to see if there was something else that could be done before they involved the police. After sitting together and negotiating, it was agreed that the 2 boys would go to Mrs. Majuma's fields every day to help her in taking care of her crops for the rest of the growing season to pay back the damage that they had done. The parents were obviously incredibly grateful that a solution was found that didn't involve the police and didn't involve them having to pay any fines. Another story is from a woman named Zainab, who's been participating in the Women's Situation Room group in the Kasai region in central DRC. And she said that she has felt the impact of the training she received through the group at home. Zainab's family fled conflict in Kasai in 2017, and her children were left traumatized by what they witnessed. Her daughter was depressed, didn't eat well, and didn't leave the house for several years. Zainab felt that the situation was hopeless and that her daughter would suffer from this depression all of her life. After taking part in training on trauma care and support through the Women's Situation Rooms, Zainab began to use some of those skills she learned to talk with her daughter each day about what happened and how she was feeling. And after several weeks of slow conversations and support, her daughter began to take care of herself again. She spoke more freely and even ventured outside of the house. Even today, she says her daughter sings in the local choir and is slowly recovering and coming back to life, something that Zainab never thought she would see happen. As I said, this is a fairly new project, but we're very excited about it at MCC, and so happy that MCIC was able to come on board and help us implement this project. We expect that it'll have some really great results as it keeps going. But I wanted to say thank you all for listening. I think I also have a short video clip.
Kuna tatizo au conflict ambayo nimewahi kutatua hapo Iamba, ambayo ilikuwa kati ya watu wawili, president wa plage na chef au notable wa kile kijiji cha Iamba. Alafu yule nani chef wa kijiji alikuwa anatuma watu 5 kwenda kukongoa samaki kwa yule president wa plage. Sasa presidenti wa plage akaona kama ni kero inasumbua. Mtu mmoja anaweza kuwa anapewa taksi anatuma watu 5 waende wakongoe kusudi yeye akwetu na rizika na wengine wanakosa zile samaki. Ule presidenti wa plage akasema kwa hii wakati sitawapa tena zile samaki za watu 5, ila mumwambie yule notable anitumie mtu huyu mmoja ambaye atakuwa na kongola zile samaki kwa ajili yake. Sasa wale watu ambao chef alikuwa anatuma kwa president wa plage wakaenda kumwambia nani chef kama president wa plage alisema hata kupatiaka tena samaki. Wakati yule president yule notable alisikia ile habari kasikia kama vile inamsumbua muro yake. Na akafikia kusema mie kama vile mkubwa wa kijiji ninaweza kuimiwa samaki namna gani na katoto sawa kali vile. Na ni polisi ije imchukue yule president wa plage. Tension ilikuwa ishakuwa mbaya kabisa. Kijiji kyote kilikuwa kishakuwa na alert. Wale waroaji, wale wapesheri walikuwa tayari wameshazunguka ile eneo yote ya prison, wanasema wanataka kuunguza ile kijiji yote na moto. Lakini tulijitahidi kaenda kwenda kuna kituo cha polisi ambao wamemfunga yule presidenti wa plage. Alafu yeye president wa plage akasema mimi sikukataa kumpatia notable samaki, ila nilikataa asilete watu 5. Tukatuma mtu akaenda kumuita chief akakuya historia gisi ilienda kama biko namna gani. Notable akasema yule mtoto, yule kijana, yule president wa plage iko empoli sana, ana adabu. Na mule muprizo atakoma mpaka siku atajuliza mimi niko nani. Na wakati nilianza kuzungumuza mambo ya kuleta amani, namna gani watu wanapaswa kuishi kwa amani, ule notable alisimamaka pale kukiti na manake akapiga kumeza, hakuna mambo ya amani hapa. Mshakaona banadamu wapi wewe wataletaka amani? Mpaka Mungu na shetani wakutanane pamoja ndio watu watapataka amani. Nikaanza sasa kumuelewesha, kumuonesha umuhimu wa watu kukaa kwa amani. Sasa ikikuwa yeye ambaye ni mkubwa wa kijiji tena anaanza anakuwa na makonflikt na wale watu wengi iko na chunga, na watu wengine watafikia hata kukimbia kile kijiji chake, watakimbia, watasema huyu shefu ni wa mubaya, na bananze nda banasambaratika kwenda zingine eneo. Mie naona nakubali kumsamehe, lakini mumshaurie, mumuelezee kama anapaswa kuwa anaheshimia wakubwa ambao wanamuongoza. Mie niko tu mkubwa kwenye iko na anapaswa kunyeshimu. Na hapo tuko pale, akakamata telefone akamuita komanda wa la polisi kusudi amutoshe ule presida wa plage mule prison. Njoo alianza akasema, ile alianza kusema banamuke nabo batachangia kwa kuleta amani. Nilianza kumuonesha kama mwanamke naye anaweza akachangia kwa kuleta amani katika nchi au katika kijiji.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that great presentation, Annie. Annie, I was wondering if you wanted to add maybe a little bit of context to the video that we just saw.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So the video that you just saw comes from one of the 5 partners that is engaging in this project, facilitating Women's Situation Room. Her name is Anna Johari, and she runs several of the situation rooms. She helps to facilitate many of the trainings that happen on peace and conflict skills, and then also on GBV prevention. She's an excellent community animator, and she works with educating people much more broadly than just women and girls in the community, but also engaging men and boys as well. And she was telling a story about a conflict that happened in her own community, where she was actually kind of called in to help facilitate kind of a conversation about how to resolve this conflict. The women in the community felt the tension, and they came to help, navigate this tricky situation between community leadership and the fishermen in the village. And, based off of their ability to kind of navigate and clearly communicate between the 2 groups, they were able to negotiate a peace between what could have been a very tense situation. So it's just like one of the stories that I think really demonstrates the power that women can have in their communities, even though it seems sometimes from afar when we look at women in DRC or in other places where there's a lot of conflict. We hear about these terrible things happening, and it seems as though women are really helpless in those situations. But really, if we're giving them just basic opportunities to engage with each other and to express their ideas, they're really able to make a significant contribution to their communities and a significant difference to everybody around.
Thank you. That's really great. I like how your presentation and the video addressed women empowerment, and yeah, I see all the connections to other SDGs, such as helping to address poverty, zero hunger, good health, and well-being. I also like how you highlighted the importance of the situation room and safe spaces for women. Having this situation rooms, safe spaces, they do provide safety for women, allowing them to discuss issues that are important to them in a supportive environment, particularly in male-dominated communities and in environments where gender-based violence is common, as you mentioned. I know these spaces are empowering, as you also mentioned, but I also know that creating the spaces could not have been easy, particularly when we consider specific cultural and social context, like gender norms, childcare commitments, gender differences when it comes to access to land and properties, which is very common in developing countries. So these factors, as we know, may hinder women's collective participation and their individual experiences of peace. So I was thinking about, as you were presenting and seeing that video, I was thinking about access, I was thinking about safety, and I was also thinking about how this intersects with existing systems of oppression. So I was wondering if you could talk about, I know you said it's a new project, I was wondering if you could just talk a bit about the barriers, some of the barriers that the project has experienced in creating the situation rooms for women, and how you address that. Maybe just a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced, particularly if you look at the sociocultural context. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, every context has, different challenges. DRC is very challenging in a lot of ways. Just the ongoing insecurity with so many militia groups operating, there's often a lot of displacement that happens. So that kind of creates a whole new barriers for people to set up normal lives, let alone for women to participate. Like I said, most women are also internally displaced, so they're kind of categorized to the side of the norm of citizens in the country, because they're not in their home community, they're in a different community. Definitely there has been pushback, if I could say, from communities. And I think a lot of that goes with kind of education around what the purpose of these women's situation rooms are. We've heard from many participants that, their husbands did not want them to participate in these types of trainings. They did not want to have any part of it. But, women would take the time to kind of explain. And we also have all of these other pieces that go alongside with it, like the nutrition training. It's often very easy to create a program that includes other benefits beyond just providing women with a safe space to discuss issues, but also nutrition training is very easy to communicate with local leadership about. This is the reason that we're getting together. We're talking about children's health and community health. One of the interesting things is the savings and loan aspect seems to be a really strong buy-in for a lot of men in the community, especially husbands, when they see that after just a couple of months, their wives have access to pretty significant amounts of money. So I think that's kind of been a factor that's helped to encourage husbands to allow their wives to participate. And even I was reading a story that was sent to me a couple of days ago, where like one husband was really against his wife participating. And then after he came and he observed and he started to see the savings group, he actually, if she can't go, he will go to the group to make sure that he knows what's going on with the group. So it is engaging beyond just women. But yeah, definitely there are tricky spaces to work in. And, another aspect that we've been trying to build in is that when we're providing humanitarian assistance in these contexts, it's usually a good gateway to try to integrate some women's equality work in these contexts. So in Central Kasai, where we had previously as MCC done a lot of humanitarian assistance in 2017 to 2019 during the conflict, part of that project actually integrated the key leadership as being a group of internally displaced people and people from local churches with a 50-50 split on male and female participation. I think that really helped to kind of pave the way for these types of groups where female leaders in the community were brought to this leadership committee to talk about this specific project. And so it's kind of been a gateway to see like, how else can women be involved in these communities?
Thank you for that, Annie. So I see we have some questions here. So I'm just going to read one. So how did MCC come up with the name, the Situation Room? Is that a translation from maybe the language of the community? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can't actually take credit for that. Women's Situation Room is actually a project that started in, I believe, Nigeria, but I might be wrong about that. But it was started by the UN. So it's a program that they've run in several other countries. I think Uganda is one of them as well, where particularly before an election and after election, they've used these women's situation rooms to try to respond to potential violence in a post-election during, as part of their humanitarian programming. So we can't take credit for the name and the idea. We did not reinvent the wheel here, but we're certainly very happy to be able to program this type of, similar type of programming in DRC with our partners there. It's nice when kind of the structure and the curriculum is already created for you and you can just apply it in a different context.
Thank you. So I have another question here. So someone is thanking you for presenting that wonderful work in DRC. They are interested in, transitional justice and conflict transformation at MCC does, and wondering if the program sees state capacity in DRC as enabling or disabling or disenabling violence against women or empowering their work. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really big question. I don't even know if I'm fully qualified to answer that. I would say that, like with any government, particularly one that is, so consumed by conflict and by constantly trying to address conflict, there are ways in which the government is very supportive of this type of programming, and a lot of the local leadership and local government offices in the programming areas, they say that they're very supportive of it. At the same time, there are cultural norms and there are kind of legal norms that prevent women from outright owning land and things like that. So there's kind of the rhetoric that, if we're keeping things at a small scale level, at the grassroots level, at the community level, we're fine to empower women and we're fine to do that. But when it comes to that broader advocacy at a larger scale, where it's impacting more than just a community level, I think that's where there's some stalling on how do we push the Congolese government in that direction. Yeah. So I don't have any great answers for that question, but
yeah, that's great. I'm also thinking of something related, because as you said, we can't stake out the sociocultural context when it comes to things like this and how it may affect women's resilience and their ability to even recover from traumatic situations, and it also may impact intervention projects. So I know you talked about this a bit, but I was just wondering, how do you then work with do you have any particular strategy that you've adopted to work with local leaders, communities, to ensure the success of this project? Just maybe, is there anything in particular that you've done?
Yeah, so before any MCC project begins, we try to engage as many stakeholders, we would call them stakeholders, as we can. So engaging local leadership, particularly when we're talking about sensitive issues, sensitive cultural issues like gender equality and gender-based violence, where you might have varying kind of support for that kind of program. We want to make sure that we're not causing more harm to the community than we would like to, than we would want to see happen. And definitely keeping our participants safe and keeping our local partners safe. So we don't want to put them in any position where they're engaging in a topic that local leadership is just not prepared to engage with. Then we need to kind of go back to our project design and say, like, how, and I've worked with projects in other contexts where we set up like sewing training, and that is kind of a space where women can gather and they can learn to sew, but it's also a space where they can talk to each other. And so, there's ways to kind of start the conversation, and it doesn't have to dive into this right away. But like I said, like in several of the spaces that we are currently programming in DRC, we've already done a bit of that groundwork through our humanitarian assistance programming, and to kind of engage local leadership in talking about, asking women for their opinions on who should be targeted for this assistance or what we should be providing to them over the past number of years has kind of paved the way for this conversation. So it's many years of work kind of coming together here, and just excellent local partners that we work with, where, there are women who are passionate about conflict resolution and they're passionate about gender-based violence prevention. And so these are their initiatives. This is not MCC telling them that this is what we would like you to do, but this is kind of MCC bridging a network of different local partners to bring them together with this same kind of plan and the same idea.
That's great. I particularly like how this project is founded on that grassroots, community-based kind of peace building model. Because I also see a lot of partnerships, so this idea, this grassroots peace building model, this idea that, peace building starts from maybe the family, having discussion in safe places where women can talk about issues and seek solution. I think that's one highlight of this project that I see here. And I also see the connection to the connections with the empowerment focused side of the event, and peace building, local peace building is really strong. So I think we only have about 4 minutes left. And I was just wondering if you could, let me see, I'm just thinking of one more question. I was wondering if you could, since we're talking about peace, we're basically talking about peace building, partnerships, and grassroots, particularly grassroots local peace building. I know many people will be wondering how they can take action, contribute to peace building in their communities. So can you say a little bit more about what attendees and our viewers can do about supporting this work and the ideals of peace? Yeah. So do you have any particular message for them? What action they can take?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really great, question. I'm going to put a link to our MCC Peace Sunday packet. So Peace Sunday is something that MCC puts forward every November. It's primarily geared at churches, but I think that there's a lot of interesting information and different stories from our peace programming around the world that might be of interest to the people on the call. As to how we can impact our own communities and peace building, I think particularly with the pandemic, we've really seen that gender-based violence is not just, an issue that happens in other countries. It happens here in Canada. And with the pandemic, we saw that, different women's shelters were reporting that their call volumes were just increasing, like by 50% or 200%, like in such a short amount of time. And the impact on women as well was just really disproportionate throughout the pandemic. And so I think, we can look to the global context, but we can also look at our own context here at home and take a look at, our own attitudes towards gender-based violence and the communities that are most impacted by that. I totally agree with you, Oluchi. MCC is an Anabaptist organization, and we really believe that peace starts with the individual. It starts within the home, and modeling peacemaking behavior starts there, and then it grows outwards to our community and to countries at a national level. But I would just encourage people to be open and listen to your neighbors, people who, in this context today with, changes in leadership across the country, listen to each other and try to not be initially judgmental is probably the best advice I could give.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie, for sharing your time and experience with us today. And thank you, everyone, for those questions, and thank you for attending. We hope that you've been inspired to take action and to promote the ideals of peace.